Hello, how's it going, folks? Welcome to another session of Coding for Superheroes, and today we're going to be learning about 3D web dev. Now, this tutorial is derived from the development process of a 3D web. So this will just be portions of work that I have done thus far, even though I have covered more. But just to give you an example of how you could go about creating a 3D website, which would be an interactive environment with some of the elements of your traditional website, but instead you have a 3D environment which has an X, Y, and Z navigation possibilities in comparison to your regular 2D, which is only the XY, meaning you can go up, down, left and right, but you cannot go forward and back. So that is just the minor distinction between the two approaches. So throughout the course, you will be learning how to load GLTF files, which is something that I have covered before, but we will be going through that but briefly. And then we'll be using Three.js's Octree module to detect collisions. We'll be using ray casting to select objects, which will serve as an example of an alternative that you could use. Instead of text that you read, you could also have a voice which reads it out, similar to an audio book. But this one will be recorded. It is not a text-to-speech API, but rather it is a pre-recorded audio which will be activated when the corresponding interactable is clicked. Then we'll do some basic post-processing effects, and then we will create an HTML tooltip. So I'm just going to take you through a run through so that you can see the kind of environment that we're going to be creating. So I have minimized the objects in the environment just for simplicity's sake, but all the relevant objects that are meant to be interactive are there. So we'll just be focusing on those. So let's just jump right in. Okay, so here we are in our 3D environment. As you can see, most of the elements that were there, the pond is no longer there. So I'm just going to go quickly to visit some of the areas to show you the things that we are going to be creating or recreating. Okay, so here we go. So right now I've got an HTML document open. Okay, so this is gonna be the foundation of our code. So as you have a look here, we've got a basic HTML document, right? So for simplicity's sake, then I would say put all of these elements down. Okay, so we'll be using an audio element, and inside of it, then we're going to be calling our about audio. Now you can basically use your own audio. I will not include my audio in it, so you can just record anything on your phone, or you can use music. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is that you want to use, it's fine. You can substitute it. But this is where I've got all my resources allocated. It's in the resources folder. Then I go to my audio, get the about audio. I used OGG and MP3 as an alternative. I think it's good to have .ogg, this extension, because with MP3 I had problems. It was not playing when it was just MP3 alone. But I kept both of them just in case, because I only tried it anyway on one web browser, which is Chrome. That's what I use, but I did not try it on any other. Okay, then secondly, then we also get our user video element, and inside then we call our showreel.mp4, which is located in the videos folder. And then this is just some basic elements that we're going to be using. We're going to be using a container, and then we're going to use this. This is what we're going to use to play the sound. So we're going to connect a click event to it, because that's the only way that we can actually get the audio to play. There needs to be an interaction for it to be played. And then here, this is the div for our tooltip. Okay, so to sort that out, we're going to go to our styles, and I'm not here to teach CSS, so you can just basically copy all of this as it is. So we're going to box size everything, and we're going to use border box, and in the body we're going to just make the margin and padding 0 and then overflow hidden. And then these are the settings for our tooltip, so just take everything as it is. And then this is going to be our blog element. This is the styling for the elements that are going to be used as as an example of how the blog will work. So what pops up on stage will be these elements based on these style settings. So we're gonna have our blog image div, blog image, and then all of this. Okay, so you can pause and just type all of that down, and once you're done, then we just continue. Like usual, I'm gonna be using the basic setup that I have. I'll be using the ES modules shims. This is so that I can be able to use this, and then afterwards, then I'll have a script where I basically write all my code and then I import all the necessary resources. So in this case, we'll be using, as usual, the Three.js module, and then we're going to be using a stats module, gltf loader, octree, capsule, GUI, Unreal Bloom Pass, Outline Pass, Render Pass, Shader Pass, FX, Trip AA Shader, Effect Composer, Positional Audio Helper. And once again, we've got our basic setup. We're going to be using a clock, so we'll have a clock, then we create a scene using three.scene. Then we give the scene a background color of this, and then we're going to create a perspective camera. We're going to give the camera a rotation order of YXZ. This is so that when we use the pointer lock system, when we use that to rotate the camera as we move around so that it follows the right rotation. In order to explain this is kind of a long topic. I don't want to go off on a tangent since I want to make this as short as possible but still concise. So just follow along and just make the order to YXZ, and then we'll add the camera to the scene. We've got our container here, so we're gonna basically create a variable, assign it to the container, and then we just append the tooltip inside the container. We create a renderer here, and then we also then append the renderer inside the container. And then here we've got our basic animate function, so this is where all the animation is going to be happening. Okay, so just under our modules that we imported, we're gonna declare these variables. Okay, so right underneath our renderer, we're gonna create a fill light, and this is just what we're gonna be using just to have basic lighting. One of the 3D objects will have a light map on it, but the rest of the geometry does not. So just so that we have a nicely lit scene that will be using the fill light in combination with a directional light. And then one other thing that we're going to need is a render target. We're going to be using this render target for our post-processing because some of the elements are going to have the outliner on them, because this is one of the things that I will illustrate, so that an object that is being interacted with can also have an outline around it just to show that this is the selected object. That is one option that you can use besides the tooltip, which will obviously make you aware that this is an interactable, but you need a render target for that. So this is what we're going to be using that for. So just pretty much copy everything as it is. Just at the moment it's just about copying and just following along so that you can get the same results, and the rest of the stuff I will explain as I go. Okay, so next up we're gonna create our different elements. So this is going to be the blog element, so we're going to create a div for that, and we're going to give it an ID of blog element. And as you remember, I showed you the CSS styles which are connected with these different elements, so all of that styling is meant for this. So then we're going to create our blog title, and then we're going to give it text content of this blog is titled, and then we're going to append the blog title into the blog element. Then we create a close element. The close element is just a red square that I will be clicking on in order to close the whole thing. So once you're like done reading the blog, then you just click on it just like you would the cross in order to close anything, any open page or UI. So that will be that, and then I will give it an ID of close element, and then I will also append that to the blog element. Then I will do basically the same thing for a lot of them. Blog image, create that and give it an ID. So there's blog image div and blog image, give it an ID as well, and then I will append a blog image div. Then I will append blog image inside of blog image div, and then I will append blog image div inside of blog element. So yeah, just follow along and create all of this. I'm sure most of you are familiar with HTML, so you should understand what all of this is doing. I don't have to explicitly explain everything word for word. So next, then I will assign an event to our close element, and then this is what I will use. This is the red block that I was talking about, where you will close the element. So when I click this, then it will make our entire element hidden. So the visibility to the style visibility will be turned to hidden. This is a boolean that I'm also going to be using. So this will help us to know if whether the book interactable is true or false. So at the moment it is true, and this will be set by our intersection, but at the moment you don't know that because we haven't actually written the code for that. But this will happen in our intersections function that I'll be writing later. So basically I'm just copying and pasting this code as it is on my document. So the order of it might not necessarily be sequential, but as everything comes together, then it will all make sense. And then I will go through everything once again just to make sure that you understand how all the dots connect. Okay, over here we're just doing our basic post-processing. So we're going to create a render pass, then assign it our scene and camera. Well, you should be familiar with this. If you are not, then I would suggest that you check out my tutorial on basic post-processing effects. And if you are completely new to the subject, then please check out my beginner tutorial on Three.js. Okay, for those of you that are also familiar with this, in order to outline a selected object, in order for that post-processing effect to work, you need a texture. So always use this try pattern, which you can find in the Three.js folder examples, textures, and then try pattern, or you can just remove it and then put it in your own folder in case you're not in case you don't have this entire Three.js master folder. And so after that, then yeah, we'll take the texture and then we'll say outline.pattern. We'll use this texture as the pattern, and then we'll just use the wrapping of three.repeat wrapping for both wrap S and wrap T. Then we'll conclude that with creating an FXAA shader, and then we will give it these following settings or values for the resolution. The next element that we're creating is the stats. We're just going to be using this to make sure that our frame rate is healthy. So this will just show us if our scene is too heavy. If the animation is lagging, then we will see from the frame rate, which will be displayed by the stats. So this is just purely for that, and these are just the style settings for that. Okay, so position is absolute and the top is 0, so it'll be on the top left corner of our screen. Okay, so the next line of code will be creating the grid where the video texture will be played. So this is how it's set up. So we've got an array which will be for the meshes and materials, and then we'll create a group. We'll create an X grid which is equal to 20, Y grid is equal to 10. So this is basically the number of cubes that we're going to create, or cube geometries that we're going to create. So it's going to be 20 across the X and 10 across the Y. Okay, so these are some of the variables that we'll be using: geometry, material, mesh, IJ. These are for iterative purposes. And then here we've got our UX. These variables are for our UV. So we'll be using the grid to separate, to basically divide our UVs. So the UVs will be divided into 20 sections, and each one of those sections is what will be projected or what will be rendered by one cube. And the size of our video is 1920 by 1080, and we're going to divide that by the X grid by 20. So the resolution will be divided by that across the X and the Y. And then over here we're just referencing our video element. And then here we're going to call three.videoTexture, and we're going to use the video element. So over here we've got our parameters. Inside we've got a map property, and we're going to assign that property our video texture. Then once we're done, then we're going to take the group and we'll add it into our scene. Then this is just the count for our cubes, and I created a boolean called cubes animate. This is what I will be using to manage the if statement for the interaction of the video. So this will be helping in terms of knowing when it is interacted with, when it should be playing, and when it should pause according to the mouse click. Okay, here's the for loop that just manages everything. Okay, so these are the settings. We create our geometry, and we've got a function here called change UVs. This I have not created yet, but when I create it, then it will be taking these arguments. So we've got our materials, and it will use count cube, and we're gonna then create a mesh Lambert, and then we'll give it the parameters. So this, each and every material will be assigned a portion of the video texture. Okay, so basically it's like, yeah, it will be using these values. So which is mainly the map. The only property that we have in parameters is map. So it's just basically mapping the video texture. So the material will be equal to the materials, whatever material is in this count or in this index. And then we'll just make some color changes to our material using the set_hs_elf method. And then we create a mesh from that. And then we position it according to these settings. Then we add that mesh to the group, and then whatever mesh is in this index will be equal to that mesh. And then we keep on iterating the cubes count. And so right here, I'm just gonna scale the group. So I'm just gonna give it the settings. This is the scaling that works for my scene. So over here, we create our change UVs function, which takes the geometry, unit X, Y, offset X, and offset Y. So this is just to offset the UV so that so that the correct UV portion will be assigned to the right material. So this is just basically to manage that. That's all. So it will be using these values, which will be these values over here. Okay, so these will be derived from whatever results we get from this entire for loop. Okay, so next up, I will just then finalize our composers or our effects. So I'll just compose a composer. This is our Unreal Bloom Pass, and this is our outline composer. I created a composer for each. If you go back, you will see. So I'm just basically assigning it the relevant shaders, and that's that. Some of these variables are kind of all over the place. So this is also one of the things that I mentioned, that, you know, everything is kind of a mess because, you know, it's still like in the rough. So there are some variables which might be like in a place where you don't really understand how it corresponds with the rest of the stuff. I will try my best to explain it, but yeah, this is at the moment how it is, you know what I mean? Otherwise, to clean up all this stuff and to like really structure it doesn't make any sense when I'm currently kind of working on this. So giving it structure right now doesn't really make sense because it could change at any time. So just so that you understand why that is, okay, like I said, it might be a bit of spaghetti, but at the end of the day, you should learn something from it still. Okay, so this is our gravity variable, which is what Octree is going to be using, and that's also going to be using this value steps per frame. So this is basically a variable that I'll be using inside of our intersection function. Okay, and then the parented variable actually will not be necessary at all. Okay, so now finally, then we come to Octree. Okay, this is how Octree works. I create a variable called new Octree. And then afterwards, I create a player collider, which will be a capsule, which takes these values. This is our start, end, and that's the radius. Okay, so the end is like the top part of the capsule, and this is the bottom part of the capsule, and that is the radius of it. And this is our player velocity, player direction. Then we've got our boolean, which is player on floor, and then mouse time, key states. Then we've got vector 1, 2, and 3 object. All right, so now we create an event listener or key down. So this is what will manage our key states. At the moment, we haven't declared what our key states will be, but this is what that will be there for. Okay, so like I said, these are key states. We've got our key down, key up, and this is where all of that will be controlled. You've got also other things that are happening here, but the main thing here is basically controlling our player collider or our player. So this is how we'll be navigating in the 3D space using the WASD keys on our keyboard. So these will be declaring whether this is false or true. And so this is our function, and this is what is happening inside of it. And my whole setting was basically derived from this example over here. Okay, so basically the code that you see, this is the basis of everything that I did. I got the base code from this, and then I just adjusted it in order to suit my own needs. So this is what all of that is doing over there in order to get this over here. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel because the code is already there for you. And yeah, especially if you don't even know how to set all of this up, I would suggest that you take this code, use it, study it, and then you understand what is going on, and then you can replicate it, you can change it and make it suit whatever needs you have for it. But it is always smart to learn from other people's code and see how things were done. So the basis of everything that I've done was based on that example, and everything that I have put on top of it is just my own implementation of this basic thing with the knowledge that I have. So this is how the control system is being managed. So you take this control function and then add all of this inside, and yeah, that should work as expected. Okay, so the next part of our code is the loading of 3D assets. First, I will create a texture. This is for loading the light map that I told you about. Okay, so we create a loader, GLTF loader. I mean, you kind of know how all of this is done, but I will just kind of quickly go through it. Then we'll say loader.load, and our scene will be located in our resources folder and the scenes folder, and then tutorial scene.gltf. And then most of the stuff that is happening here, this is just me logging just to make sure, or if I want to check the names of the objects that are in the scene, if I'm importing new assets, or if I want to just pick and choose like what I want to change to each one of the objects that I'm loading. This is what I'm doing. So basically you can go through all of this and just kind of have a look at the different things that I'm doing. For instance, I'm changing the missive for our path markers. This is the changes to the spheres that you see in the gallery for them to glow. So I'm just giving them this color, turning the metalness to 0, because when you import, then the metalness is, I think it's on 1, but you've got some kind of setting on metalness, so everything is shiny. And so yeah, just go through different objects like the spotlight, the statue. So this is where I manage some of the stuff, just so that when it's in the scene, then it looks the way that I want it to, or it behaves in the way that I want it to. And this is also what's managing like our interactables. Any object that has the name interactable on it will be added to this array, and then later on, then this is the array that's going to be used in the intersection function in order to then iterate through this array to check if any of the objects inside of this array are being interacted with, and if true, then whatever needs to happen with that particular object will happen. And so once I'm done with all of that, then I add our scene to our main scene, the GLTF scene. This is basically the entire scene that we just loaded, and then I add it to our main scene in Three.js, and then I take that and add it into the world trees from graph node, and then then Octree will do its thing with this entire scene. And then after that, then I call our animate function. Only when everything has been loaded, then we start to animate. Okay, so one of the functions that support the way that Octree works is the teleport player, if OOB, whatever that's supposed to mean. Basically this manages the placement of our player or the player object. If it is below a certain position that is in the y-axis, then it will then put it back on the surface. Okay, so you will adjust according to where your surface is positioned. Okay, so if your floor is like 5 levels up, you will have to make adjustments to the start part of the capsule, which is the player collider. And just on top of it, these are also some of the functions that support the behavior. So right here we've got our player collisions, and this is how Octree is managing the collisions. So it's going to take our player collider, which is the capsule. If you want to really get a good idea of how this works, just go to the world Octree capsule intersect method, and then you will see how it manages whatever capsule that has been given here and how that interacts with the rest of the world that Octree is managing. Then you can really understand what is happening here. But basically we're just using this method and taking the capsule, putting it in there, and this is what is managing the collision between this capsule and the rest of the 3D environment. So this is what will determine whether the player is on the floor or not, and it will also kind of complement this one over here. So these are our player collisions, and this is the function that updates our player. So this will be updating the player's position depending on the keys that are pressed, or whether it will be moving forward or sideways. So this is just to manage all of that. And then the get forward vector, this is to use the mouse position. So when the pointer lock is switched on, then it will be controlling the camera, right? And then this function will be taking the camera's forward direction, and then it will translate that to the player collider. So wherever the camera is facing, that will be the forward position. And over here, it's kind of doing a similar thing, but mainly with the side movements. So wherever the forward position is, then it will then figure out what the left or right position is according to player direction, okay, which is determined by the camera. And so next up, this is a function that controls our hologram. Okay, the hologram is the interaction in the gallery, or the image that pops up when you hover over any one of those statues. What it basically does, it checks the name of that particular object. And what I'm doing here is I'm replacing something. Can't remember exactly what I'm replacing here. Okay, I think I'm replacing the underscore. I forgot what I actually did here, to be honest. I think I'm replacing the underscore so that it checks for a name, so that the underscore does not get in the way, because an underscore is also considered a character, right? So I'm just using this to kind of filter that out, and then I will check whatever name I get from there. Then I will check that name to see if it corresponds to the object that I'm checking, and if the name matches, then it will activate the hologram. And I think the holograms should be in, yeah, the hologram group. They should be in this array over here called hologram group. So it will check each one of them, and then it will turn it on and off according to which statue object has been interacted with. Alright, I'll say one other aspect that I forgot, that I probably should have started with, is resizing. Okay, so this is also like one of those basic things, but yeah, you know, every time you change the size of your window, then it should just re-render and adjust the resolution according to the aspect ratio of your window. And we're also calling the FXAA shader. This is like always so difficult. Should come up with like better names. Okay, but that's that. This is like more related to post-processing, but this is like always part of the base code that I use with whatever tutorial that I create. Okay, so over here then I've got a click event to our window, and this is then where I kind of manage the different like interactables. Like for instance here, this is the button interactable. Okay, so this is meant to play the voice. Okay, so when all of these are true, then it will then allow me to then play the voice which is in the gallery. Okay, so all of these conditions have to be met first, or otherwise okay, well, it's either it's on or off. If it's on, then when I click on it again, then it will pause it. So this is what is managing all of that. And then this is for animating the cubes. Basically, it's not animating the cubes, but it's just playing the video on the cubes. So I called cube animate. This can either be true or false. So when I click on it, then this will be set to true. And when all of these conditions are met and the object on which I've clicked on is called project card interactable, then it will play the video. And if I click on it again, then it will pause. So inside of the click event, this is where I'm managing the interaction for these two parts of the entire project. And last but not least, then we create the setup for our interaction, right? This is also probably one of those basic settings that you've seen before in other tutorials that I've created, but this is an array of selected objects, and then I create object selected. This is basically just to clean it up. So whenever I select an object, then it will only have one object in the array. Okay, so whenever I click on another one, then it will remove any objects inside of the array, and then it will insert the new one. So there will always be only index 0 will always have something on it, but it will always be erased and kind of refreshed again with a new object. So that's what that's doing. And this inside here is going to use interactables. There's a variable called interactables. That was an array that I created over here. So this is the array that's going to be holding all the interactables. So then it will take that array and all the objects that are inside of that array, then it will use them to check whether any of them have been interacted with. And it's also over here. You see, this is where basically the objects are being pushed into this array. So it will check if it's interactable, then it will push it into that array. And once it has been pushed, it will check to see if the length of it is bigger than 0, which means that there is something inside of the the array, and when that is true, then it will then continue with checking of the interaction or intersection. As you can see, the different objects that are being interacted are being given the corresponding behavior. This is for our tooltip. So whenever there's an interactable that is being interacted with, then the tooltip will pop up, and then it will show the text content, which will be the name of the object that is being intersected. And similar to the book, this will also control the pointer lock. So when I interact with the book, when I hover over it, it will exit pointer lock, which is where I'm able to then move the mouse around without actually moving the camera, and it will also make it visible. But when I click on the red box, then pointer lock will be turned back. Actually, no, it will not be turned back on as yet. It will first of all make this one invisible. It will make the visibility hidden, and then when I click again on the stage, then it will turn pointer lock back on. Okay, so that's how that is meant to work. And in here, this is where then I call the hologram interaction. I will give it the object that is being intersected over here, and that information is then what will be used over here. So other thing that we then need to do is then to also do the relevant things inside of our animate. Okay, inside of animate, we're going to do a couple of things. What I'm going to do is just basically copy and paste the current code as it is, and just kind of override whatever you see right now. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over it, and then I will explain what everything is doing. So here we create our delta time. This is what we're going to be using for basically the animation of player object. It will be using, these are the functions that we created earlier, or that we were looking at earlier, which Octree is using. So it is using delta time to manage and update the player, to check the controls, to check which key is being played, and how to also manage these different states. And then inside of this for loop, this is then where we're also going to be calling teleport player if OOB. I don't know what the OOB really stands for, but yeah. And then over here, the group.children.length is, so basically this is where I am using this to make sure that if our group is not empty, meaning that when we have generated our cubes, then it will take that group and then it will always face the camera position. Now the camera position is where the player is, because the player is the main camera which is looking into the 3D world. Okay, so this is managing the cubes that are playing the video texture on them. And over here I'm also doing the same thing. It's managing the rotation of our sphere in the gallery. So it just checks to see if the sphere is there, and if the sphere is there, then it will just rotate it. As you've noticed when I enter the gallery, that the sphere is rotating. If you've noticed that when I enter the gallery, then the light turns off. So basically I used this distance between player to check the distance of the player and where the actual gallery is located. So then when the distance is less than 30, then this is then where we use this composer right here, which is the Unreal Bloom effect, so that everything is glowing in the dark. But other than that, if that is not true, then we're just going to render normally. We're going to use a normal renderer. And so this is basically doing that. It's just here switching on the right renderer, and then down here it is managing the intensity of the light. It is either 0 or 2. Okay, so that's basically all that is doing. Over here, this is doing the same thing as this over here, just managing the look at to say if the hologram is active, then it will always be facing the camera position. So wherever the player is positioned in 3D space, it will always be facing the player. Okay, so now I'm going to play just to see if everything works. Okay, I forgot to actually put the relevant resources. That is my light map and my 3D scene. I'll just do that quickly and then I'll just do it again. Okay, so here we are, and this is our scene. So it looks like everything is working, so that's fine. Oops. Okay, so remember that if player.woobb whatever, where is it? The teleport player, this one, let's see where it is. So that's what that is doing. Okay, so whenever I fall, then it will position me back here. Okay, so that's what that function is doing. So now let's check if then everything is like behaving the way that it should. Come in here. Okay, so we hover over it. As you can see, this is the project card interactable. We click on it. Okay, so there we go. So this is our show reel. So it is working accordingly. Stop it. So there it is. Okay, so this is managed by this over here. Okay, this is what I was talking about. Yeah, if cubes animate is equal to not cubes animate, then it will play and it will check if this project card interactable. And so far that is working. So let's check if the rest of the stuff is working as it should. Okay, so here we go. So now we interacted with our book, and as you can see, now I can just move around my mouse button and the pointer lock is off. Okay, so this is where we manage that, or like I was saying before. So this is our book interaction. We make it true, and then it will exit the pointer lock, which is what allows me to do all of this. And if I click over here, then it will be off, and then I will click again, then I can just, okay, well, this hit that again, so that's why that happened. Let's try to move. Yeah, great. So that works. Okay, what next? We're going to the gallery now. Okay, so you can see this is where the distance is being measured. Over here, the distance between player and collider. Okay, so as I'm moving, then it will check to see how far I am, and as soon as I'm at the doorstep, basically, then it will turn the fill light off. And then we've got this interaction. I think there might be a problem probably with one of the holograms, because I don't have all the resources. So, oh, okay, there it is. Let's see if I go to the others, if this will.
I am a dreamer whose passion is good.
Okay, yes, that's the other thing that I forgot to mention. When I hover over it, then the hologram appears, and if I click on it while it is basically.
By a strong belief in human potential. I'm a believer in humanity's ability.
Okay, so then I turned it off. Ooh, what the hell was that? Okay, so I think roughly you kind of get the idea, and I tried my best to actually really, make this work. I must say it's one of the longest tutorial. Okay, I don't want to say the longest tutorial. I've always avoided making long tutorials unless if it was absolutely necessary, you know what I mean? With certain things, of course, I have to then cover all the bases. But I've avoided making long tutorials. But this was definitely one of them because, well, I just kind of had to, wing this whole thing to really make something out of nothing, really, because it was a mess in a way. But I hope that you still learned something from it. That's the most important thing, because I tried to really explain as much as I possibly can, even though, yeah, most of the stuff was all over the place and not really sequential. And I think for people that are very orderly, you know what I mean, I'm not such a stickler for order necessarily, only when of course you're creating a full, when you're creating an application and finalizing, everything has to be well structured. But when I'm doing something, then working rough makes more sense, because I cannot establish a structure when I've not established all the elements that are going to be within the structure and how they will be managed. Okay, but then with all of that said, yeah, this is it guys. So I've done my duty. So yeah, I hope that was clear enough, and whatever I explained, that it was thorough. If not, let me know what you think. But yeah, other than that, then I will say, with all of that said, love and peace. I'm gonna call this. Oh no, wait. Before I do that, I'm gonna do one more thing, and that is, yes, because I created an outliner, right, to show you that you can also have the option of highlighting an object and it will be outlined, and that is in the gallery section, because I think put only those objects to have that effect. And anyway, because it's only in the gallery where the lights go off and then you have a very strong bloom effect. So I'm just gonna make changes to the code and then we'll go back. Okay, let's do it again. Like a little bunny hopping. You see? So now, now you can just have this outline on any object that you hover on. Well, not any object, only the interactables. So this is one option, but this mainly works. Well, it would still work even if the environment was not dark. You could just choose the right color, according to your color scheme. Yeah, but this is one option of highlighting interactables. Well, you could, I don't know. It's one option in conjunction with the tooltip. Okay, so yeah, that's the end of it right there. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did. With all that said, I just want to say love and peace. To help me grow my channel, once again, subscribe, like, do all the things that you need to do. You know what to do. So yeah, do it right now. Much love. Give thanks. I'm out.